As Election Day looms, the fierce contest between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump has hit a fever pitch. With final polls showing razor-thin margins, this could be one of the tightest races in modern history, leaving the nation on edge and awaiting a game-changing result. The 2024 United States presidential election marks a crucial turning point in the country's political landscape. This year's election is not only about selecting the nation's leader for the next 4 years, but also reflects deeper societal issues and ideological divides that have emerged in recent years. Set for November 5th, this election will feature Kamala Harris and Donald Trump as the Democratic and Republican candidates, respectively, and promises to be one of the most contentious contests in recent history. While Harris, formerly the vice president, aims to build on the current administration's policies, Trump is seeking a second non-consecutive term after his defeat in 2020. The choice between these candidates underscores contrasting visions for America's future on pressing issues like immigration, healthcare, climate change, and democracy. As voters cast their ballots in swing states such as Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, the implications for the United States political system and its global influence are profound, making this election a focal point of both domestic and international attention. Forecasting the outcome of this tight race holds particular importance. Predictive models, which aggregate data from polls, historical election patterns, and economic indicators, help in navigating the uncertain dynamics of electoral outcomes. The science behind election forecasting goes beyond predicting a simple win or loss. It frames the uncertainties, stability, and trends within the election over time. Statistical models provide the public, analysts, and campaigns with a more grounded understanding of the race, countering impulsive reactions to daily poll fluctuations. For instance, election forecasts serve as a counterbalance to overreactions caused by momentary polling shifts, which are often misconstrued in media narratives. The real strength of these models lies in their ability to communicate the probabilities and uncertainties involved in elections, much like the models used in weather forecasting. Furthermore, forecasts play a role in political psychology by moderating extreme narratives and encouraging a focus on data-driven insights rather than unsubstantiated claims. One sec, get election results before anyone else. Subscribe now for our early night coverage on November 5th. Back to the news. When it comes to the 2024 presidential election, one prominent factor in this election echoes the hidden vote phenomenon observed in 2016 when many Trump supporters, reluctant to reveal their preferences in polls, ultimately tipped key states in his favor. However, this year's version of the hidden vote seems to favor Harris, especially young female ghost voters. These voters, primarily women between 18 and 35, remain largely underrepresented in polling data, making them a potential force that could reshape the election in her favor. Democratic strategists recall the unexpected influence of young women in past elections, notably in 2022, when their turnout helped protect Democratic seats in the Senate amid unexpected resistance to Republican predictions. Many of these young women, motivated by reproductive rights and opposition to Trump's rhetoric, became ghost voters that polling missed. Pollsters often struggle to capture this demographic due to their sporadic voting history and tendency to avoid traditional news outlets. Recognizing the importance of these elusive voters, Harris's campaign has prioritized outreach through cultural touchpoints and social media. Her rally with Beyoncé in Houston, emphasizing abortion rights, was one example of her efforts to connect with these low-propensity voters. Additionally, celebrity endorsements from figures like Taylor Swift have shown their influence in real time. Swift's social media support for Harris reportedly spurred nearly 500,000 new voter registrations. Analysts have noted a trend of increased optimism and engagement among young women since Biden announced he would not run, opening a path for Harris to become the first woman president. Data also shows that young women voters have steadily become more hopeful about the country's future with Harris as the nominee. A recent survey revealed that 42% of young women felt optimistic about America's future, up from 25% earlier this year. They view Harris's candidacy as a new chapter, particularly as it pertains to women's rights. For many, Harris represents a candidate who aligns with their pro-choice stance, especially in light of the Supreme Court's 2022 decision in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, which overturned Roe v. Wade. This demographics turnout could potentially counterbalance any resurgence of Trump support, making Harris's reliance on ghost voters a significant campaign strategy. This focus on young female voters aligns with the Democratic belief that the future of their party depends on mobilizing underrepresented groups that pollsters struggle to measure accurately. Analysts argue that elections are won by engaging voters who typically remain on the sidelines. With that in mind, Harris's campaign bets on the potential of young women to shape the outcome of this election, just as their quiet but impactful presence did in 2022, underscoring the idea that an unseen but powerful wave of female ghost voters could be the tipping point in this race. Apart from this, a key demographic Harris targets is Republicans who supported former primary candidate Nikki Haley, particularly those who reject the party's Trump-aligned faction. Haley voters for Harris, led by organizers in swing states like Michigan and North Carolina, believes a substantial segment of these voters could support Harris, particularly in battleground states. Robert Schwartz, Michigan director for Haley Voters for Harris, suggests a third of Haley voters might vote for Harris, estimating up to 2 million in total. North Carolina's Michael Tucker highlights how some Republican voters are reassessing their values, noting issues like reproductive rights and party unity that don't align with the GOP's current direction. Tucker describes the strategy as giving moderate Republicans a permission structure to vote for a Democrat without fully abandoning conservative principles. However, political strategists like Kevin Madden suggest that this wave of silent GOP voters may not be as large as Cheney projects. Both campaigns, he argues, have poured extensive resources into identifying and mobilizing voters, leaving little room for significant, undetected voter shifts. Despite skepticism, John Conway of Republican Voters Against Trump believes there is still a chance for a cascade of disenchanted Republicans to break with Trump. His organization's focus groups reveal that many who backed Trump in the past, including those who later voted for Biden, may lean toward Harris, often driven by opposition to Trump's behavior post-January 6, or his rhetoric about internal enemies. For Harris, winning over even a fraction of silent Republican voters could provide a critical edge. However, as Election Day approaches, the turnout of these voters versus their likelihood to stay home may ultimately define the success of this cross-party outreach. Unlike Harris's discrete ghost coalition, which includes moderate Republicans and independents hesitant to openly support a Democratic candidate, Trump's supporters are now more visible than ever. Their enthusiastic presence, manifested in a vibrant display of Trump paraphernalia, from yard signs to rallies, is a testament to the level of dedication within his base. During his initial presidential bid in 2016, Trump's appeal attracted what some described as a silent majority of voters, individuals who, despite feeling alienated or overlooked by mainstream political discourse, found resonance in his unfiltered rhetoric and populist message. Back then, many Trump supporters were reluctant to openly express their allegiance due to the political backlash or social stigma they might face, especially in traditionally liberal or moderate areas. Yet as Trump's influence in the Republican Party grew, so did the public's willingness to associate with his brand of politics. Over time, his movement shifted from being a quiet undercurrent to an overtly proud and vocal base. One of the most telling signs of this shift has been the prevalence of pro-Trump merchandise and signage, which adorns countless front yards, vehicles, and public spaces across the country. In many cases, these visible declarations of support have become symbolic acts of defiance against what supporters perceive as liberal or elite establishment values. Trump's rallies also play a crucial role, serving not only as a platform for policy announcements, but as a way to cultivate an intensely loyal community. These gatherings often draw thousands and generate extensive media coverage, amplifying the sense of solidarity and empowerment within his following. The current visibility of Trump's supporters represents a stark contrast to the quieter, more subdued group that Harris and her allies are targeting. While some Republicans, like former Congressman Fred Upton and moderate anti-Trump conservatives, such as Liz Cheney, are backing Harris quietly or, at best, cautiously, the Trump camp has openly mobilized, leveraging their numbers as a show of force. This shift reveals an evolution in Trump's support base, from an underestimated contingent in 2016 to an unmissable force in 2024. As the race heats up, both candidates face the task of drawing out hidden or undecided voters while also grappling with the impacts of their respective, highly distinct coalitions. One public and proud, the other reserved but quietly substantial. But apart from these unpredictable voters, in the lead-up to Election Day, both candidates have their strongholds. Harris has a comfortable lead in several states, totaling 181 electoral votes, including the District of Columbia and Oregon. These states, known for favoring Democratic candidates, are projected to be safe territory for Harris. On the Republican side, Trump holds solid leads in traditional GOP strongholds across the Midwest and the Deep South, which secure him 113 electoral votes. With these early counts, Harris has a narrow lead over Trump as they each focus on swing states and critical battlegrounds. In states where the Democratic margin is expected to range from 5% to 15%, Harris appears likely to secure Colorado, New Mexico, Minnesota, Virginia, Maine, and New Hampshire. These states saw similar margins in 2020, and despite minor fluctuations in individual polls, Harris's support appears steady. For example, Biden won Minnesota by 7%, and recent polls place Harris within a similar range. Harris's campaign has successfully energized the Democratic base in these areas, ensuring likely victories. For Trump, South Carolina and Alaska show strong likely support. Despite speculation that Alaska might lean more Democratic over time, it remains reliably Republican this cycle. Trump is expected to retain these states with a solid margin, especially as conservative voters show consistent turnout patterns. Iowa and Ohio, where Trump's support appeared to waver earlier, now seem likely to remain in his column, though perhaps with smaller margins than in 2020. A recent poll from Selzer, one of Iowa's most accurate pollsters, showed Trump only 4 points ahead in early September, half his margin from 2020. However, this still points to a probable victory for Trump in these states. Texas and Florida are again set to be pivotal states, albeit with Trump still holding an edge in both. In Texas, Harris has seen modest gains among suburban voters, but the conservative shift along the Rio Grande Valley among Latino voters has neutralized these gains. Although the state's suburbs continue trending Democratic, Harris will likely fall short by around 5.6% overall in Texas. Florida, a state that turned more Republican in recent years, particularly with Governor Ron DeSantis's impressive margin in 2022, is also leaning toward Trump. With Trump's 3.4% victory in 2020, a modest gain in his favor is expected, as the state has seen a Republican shift in both urban and suburban areas. With 271 electoral votes likely for Harris and 235 for Trump, 7 key battlegrounds remain, including Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Nevada. These states could ultimately determine the presidency. Michigan and Pennsylvania have been consistent Democratic-leaning battlegrounds. Harris leads by nearly 1% in Michigan, where Biden won by almost 3% in 2020. The Harris campaign is optimistic that the shift in Michigan's suburbs and steady Democratic turnout will hold, giving her a narrow but durable lead. In Pennsylvania, Harris faces a tighter race but remains in contention. With suburban areas around Philadelphia favoring Democrats, Harris's slight edge among female and white suburban voters could prove decisive. Even though polling suggests only a slim margin, the hidden Harris vote could make a critical difference in Pennsylvania, potentially adding a crucial 19 electoral votes to her tally. In both North Carolina and Georgia, Trump appears poised to hold narrow leads. North Carolina, which Trump won by 1.3% in 2020, shows only modest gains for Harris. Despite the state's long-term demographic shift towards Democrats, Trump's established base and turnout among rural voters likely ensure his advantage here. Georgia is forecasted to be the tightest race, with Trump slightly ahead. Although Harris may benefit from increased turnout among younger and minority voters, Trump's solid rural and suburban support may offset this. In Arizona, Harris has managed to edge out Trump in a traditionally conservative state. With backing from high-profile Republican figures like former Senator Jeff Flake and a growing base of Democratic suburban voters, Harris could flip Arizona. This outcome would mirror Biden's narrow victory in 2020 and reflect Arizona's continued demographic shift. In Nevada, Harris's campaign benefits from the state's consistent trend of polling errors that underestimate Democratic support. In the past 2 elections, polling predicted tight races, yet Democrats emerged victorious. Polling averages currently suggest Harris has a slight lead, reinforced by early voting trends and a dependable Democratic base. Wisconsin remains the final and potentially deciding state. Biden won here by 0.6% in 2020, and both campaigns have poured resources into this critical battleground. Wisconsin's population of working-class white voters, a core demographic for Trump, gives him an edge. However, Harris's campaign has worked to expand turnout among suburban and urban voters in Milwaukee and Madison, aiming to replicate Biden's narrow win. In this close contest, even a fraction of a percent could swing the state. As the campaigns enter the final week, Harris and Trump each remain within striking distance of the presidency. Harris stands at an estimated 271 electoral votes, with likely victories in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, and Wisconsin. Trump, with around 235 electoral votes, is poised to secure North Carolina and Georgia. If trends hold, this election could see Harris winning by a narrow margin, echoing Biden's path to victory in 2020. In these last intense days, both campaigns are pushing hard to sway undecided voters and boost turnout, aware that every single vote could tip the balance. Key battleground states hang in the balance, and unpredictable factors like ghost voters or sudden shifts in voter turnout could reshape everything. While we can't call the outcome yet, on November 5th, it'll be your vote that decides. Don't miss your chance to make history, make sure to vote. But for now, if this deep dive into brand new 2024 election forecast update, shocking new projections with just 1 week left, caught your interest, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to Global News Network, and tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. We're here to bring you the news that matters, the moments that define our times, and the debates that shape our future. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.